as a kid, my dad had an art degree, and he didn't pursue it for a job, but he was always drawing and things. So whether it's the genetics or the exposure, art was always a thing for me. And then, so that was kind of through childhood. I was always interested in art. It was like always this weaving in, but I never pursued it heavily. I wasn't like always drawing or painting or stuff, but I played around. Like I had a Bob Ross set of paints and stuff and would watch his show and that kind of stuff through the years. So art was kind of always in my realm, but it wasn't that focal point of I'm going to be an artist when I grow up for sure. It just like always liked art, and it was always this looming thing, or like it's the thing I most relate to. But when I was in high school, I moved to St. George. That's how I got to Utah, was via moving to St. George from Washington State. And I got into golf. I was like, well, maybe I'll do a business degree because that relates to golf if I have a backup plan, golf course management or that kind of thing, a fallback. And I kind of hated that program. I don't think I really hate business, but I didn't like this program that I was offered. So I quit school and just worked for a couple of years and decided then I need to go back. I want to finish college and I'm going to pursue the thing that I always liked. How about I just do art? That's what I always wanted to do. So I went back to the University of Utah and started studying painting there. And one of the professors there said, you should go to Helper and study with a couple of retired professors down there, Dave Jordan and Paul Davis. I did have my studio there for 2 years and kind of just studied under Dave. And he kind of, along with a number of things, one of the key things to me was paint what you like, which was a variety of things, but crayons were one of them for me. And that, so I started painting a few crayons, and then I thought it'd be cool to add a crayon page. And I don't want to do kids imagery, so how about I incorporate art history, because I always loved art history. So a Mona Lisa, of course, a Mona Lisa crayon page is the start to that. And that kind of, I think this whole body of work that I've kind of turned into a career is based on that notion of you start crayons, color, I think that color, and then realizing to go, doesn't have to be a crayon. I can kind of paint anything and incorporate art history, pop culture, those things. I can draw a lot from Dave. Like the weekend problem to fix for them to take away. Their homework was do a painting of a bug splattering on a windshield. And when they came back in with all the paintings that everyone did, the most effective painting in that group was somebody who actually like took paint and flung it and smashed it into the canvas, and so it just exploded. So just the act was actually more convincing than somebody like looking at photos of a bug on the windshield and doing that because it mimicked the process. And I think that's one of the things I have fun with is mimicking processes or taking that and trying to go, if I'm referencing these as I'm not, obviously this is, I'm interpreting that kind of those oil paintings through kind of a modern lens of taking that. So whether it's oil paint or crayon or something else, taking from how does it work? Like when I paint crayons, if I'm going to make something look like there's crayon on the canvas, the way I found to do that best was to take a Q-tip and dip it in the paint where it's still really stiff when there's no medium added or anything. It's just like right out of the tube, and then drag it across the surface, because the canvas texture has that it kind of allows, the same way the wax drags on paper, that hits that high spots of the paper, it would do it on canvas. So it's just trial and error to find and go what processes match what you're trying to do. Your personality is the thing you can't suppress in your paint, in your paintings. It's like it keeps showing up. That same way to go what is done, because we see like the work in this show, there's an incredible range of what is in here, and what somebody would consider done is going to vary for each artist. So looking at having, in this case, having things where it feels like there's elements of spray paint in it, yet it's got polish and that back and forth, and kind of weaving those two together. So this was that somewhere between the original Hudson River thing, which are pretty tight, they're pretty precise painters that were executing it, highly trained, gone to academic schools and really knew technique at a high level, combined with that graffiti and street art, which is loose and kind of open and immediate. And so for me, blending in this case, but each one is unique. So what makes me happy is when I feel like it's, in this case, going, I need to satisfy both of those things to feel like it's finished or feel content with it, that it's got some openness, and that this kind of just flows, and works in a painterly way, and yet there's a tightness to it or spots that reflect that Hudson River quality that I'm referencing as well. I came in and did the background really quickly in a very painterly way, and a lot of that shows that it's like that first step that kind of is showing through, and this is typical for my paintings, that there's a lot of kind of glazing or transparent layers that build through that, including the spray paint so I have I have oil paint in spray cans that we make ourselves. Dave does them as well. Everything's about, being a disciple of Dave, but so having spray paint, actually having a little bit of oil spray paint, I can go back in and kind of truly mimic that process. The same way we were talking about earlier, in this case, literally making oil paint and spray cans so that you can incorporate that a little bit in the painting, make it more, for that little bit more of authenticity that I'm looking for. But yeah, trying to get that open background and let some of that show while the can keeps getting polished and worked. Like our store we're looking for it to be accessible and not wanting art to be, for me, not wanting it to be something that is, I think it easily can get associated with that kind of elitism. Somebody I've referenced, Thomas Kincaid, who did these things where he was blurring the lines between what's an original painting and what is a print, and kind of almost confusing that as a way to, I think, inflate pricing on reproductions. We're trying to avoid that and go directly at that and kind of go, it does ask interesting questions about what is value in art, those kinds of things, but that importance of being accessible and to go, isn't it cool? I mean, to me, in a way, it's just as cool that you have that on a water bottle or on a phone as it is that you have a painting on the wall. Like it's still an honor either way to me, even whether you spend $2 or 2,000. It doesn't matter really in that sense. We just depend on the originals as a way to sustain. So mostly I feel like I do conceptualize the painting mostly in my head. Like in this one, I knew I wanted to use this as the background scene because I think it's the most iconic painting of that group, but also it was a couple incarnations of how we even get to this concept, but once I settled on the idea of the spray paint, I knew that right away. I was like, oh, I'm going to put the can in that oxbow type of a place and set it in the landscape in that way. So knowing that kind of set the scale roughly for where if the bottom of the can has to go here, the top, kind of weaving those together. And that's where it does feel a bit like a jigsaw puzzle. I had no idea that pastoral would come in to quite look like that. I've done that in the past where I've incorporated graffiti words into the scenes. Usually they're behind them at the top, which I like. It works really well to me as a label. But in this case, with it, the can being up, and then kind of weaving it in and go, oh, that's a whole new problem to solve. And then, not knowing it would go there, and then trying to solve that, not realizing I was really bummed I was going to lose the river. I felt like I needed something down here to anchor the scene. I'm going to lose the river. So how did I do it? What if the river just went right through the words? So that it is that back and forth and kind of coming together of that little, I don't know, that dance, I guess. Of course, right out of it, the oil in the can, and doing that on purpose, kind of, those are the end flickers to go. It needs that element of spray paint in the scene to me, or that look of spray to sell it. It also provides, that when you kind of misting, especially in here, I'm coming over with white, with this white spray paint, that creates, because white is not fully transparent, it's like either not transparent at all or semi-transparent at best. I actually love it though, because what it does is that instead of being a more traditional, like in the old master kind of way of glazing, they're usually doing, in theory, like a fully transparent color, so you're really seeing through and you get all that depth. In this case, the white is almost obscuring what's behind slightly, and so that it's both flattening the space and creating depth at the same time, which I think kind of fits a more modern aesthetic of what painting became over time when painting went through its process of photography comes along, and now painting doesn't need to document the world, and then we see painting degrade down to essentially minimalism and nothing, where you have this transition from high realism to that over stretch of like 100 years essentially, or even less. But that, for me, is really fun to then incorporate this kind of going, we're digging, I've heard this, one professor of mine said, digging the Renaissance hole of that, creating space, yet modernism's flattening out. And I don't know, I think all my, Dave, Paul, John Erickson, all these different U teachers I had, they're all playing with that in their own way. It's like at this point, essentially painting is unnecessary as from a documenting standpoint. It's doing something else in culture. So it almost feels like, as a painter, you're looking back at this history of painting, and you can kind of sample in and out of that wherever you want. It's like this feels almost like a circle or its own little world that I can just kind of pull from in that way. So kind of some, again, modern, hopefully incorporating some modern things and some old things, and I don't know, shaking them up and making a new salad dressing.